Amid the COVID-19 outbreak, a disturbed and socially isolated young man is eager to seek love from every woman he encounters. However, his constant rejection pushed him to commit unspeakable acts to fulfill his desire. A man named Daniel lives alone in his apartment, while a contagious illness spreads across the world. He spends the majority of his time watching television shows, cooking meals, sleeping, and driving around in his van. One day, after making adjustments to the interior of his van, he sets up a tripod and a camera inside so he'll have footage of his possible encounters for his film. While driving, Daniel proceeds to describe himself as a strong and good man who believes that everything is beautiful if seen through the right perspective. He stops at an open parking lot, taking a moment to watch and objectify an older woman in secrecy. However, his mood sours at the sight of a man having a smoke. He feels threatened by his confidence, so he proceeds to express his disdain toward him. At one point, he sees a woman and starts approaching her while she's loading her groceries in her car. He offers her help, but she politely declines, not wanting to interact with a stranger. Her discomfort at his sudden presence is evident, so she promptly retreats inside her vehicle. After that encounter, Daniel drives out again to get some cash. While on his way, he voices out his resentment toward women for their constant rejection and cold treatment of him. He believes that he also deserves to experience love like everyone else. Later, Daniel returns home from the hardware store, where he bought duct tape, chains, and a shovel. By the evening, he heads to his room and starts editing a film, revealing that this work is dedicated to putting an end to the mistreatment that he's received all his life. The next day, Daniel receives a phone call from his mother, Jeanette, but he allows it to go to voicemail. In her message, she wonders if he's taking his medications and requests him to update her about his well-being, mentioning her plan to visit him if she receives no response from him. Moments later, Daniel begins constructing a wooden bed frame, which he installs inside his van afterward. That afternoon, a knock on his door awakens Daniel, leaving him curious. He proceeds to check who his sudden visitor is, only to find his mom waiting on the doorstep. He shows irritation upon hearing her voice and is adamant about not letting her come inside his home despite her persistent pleas. With his frustration growing and his patience running out, he slowly raises a gun and points it at his mother behind the door. Fortunately, she's able to leave before he can pull the trigger. In the living room, the supplies he bought at the hardware store are neatly placed on the floor. Daniel quickly puts on a glove and grabs the groceries his mother left at the front door, sanitizing each item with utmost care. Then, in his backyard, he continues to modify his van's interior by placing a mattress on the wooden bed frame. While doing so, he fantasizes about feeling a woman on the said mattress. As the sun begins to set, he drives to a deserted area where he digs a fire pit. He sits next to the blazing fire while his hand carries a gun and begins to get lost in his thoughts. For him, he loathes women as they're only after rich, handsome, and passionate men, which he deems as unrealistic desires. By morning, Daniel starts to practice pointing a gun at an imaginary target, aggressively hurling curse words toward it. When he returns to the parking lot that same day, he sees a man putting groceries in his car, which annoys him. However, his mood changes when he sees a woman, and he starts fantasizing about her. He proceeds to follow her home while voicing out his wicked plans when he gets the chance to be with her. However, he feels displeased when the woman's husband appears, believing that he could have made her happier than him. He drives away and returns home, where he angrily mutters about the failed encounter. The following day, he watches a family come out of a store, where he shows interest in the wife but abhors her husband. Suddenly, he sees Madison Richards, a woman in a floral dress, helping her younger brother into her car. He professes his fondness for her and follows her to her residence. Calmly and meticulously, he films her every movement and lingers outside her house with unwavering patience and determination to uncover more details about her. Ultimately, he decides to stay there overnight just to get a chance to encounter her again. On the succeeding day, he feels distraught upon seeing that her car is not in the garage, so he continues to wait for her until midnight. Eventually, she comes home, so he immediately gets out of his van with no hesitation and attacks her from behind. He shoves her into his van, restraining her with chains and using duct tape to cover her mouth, preventing her screams from attracting attention. Daniel then drives back to the secluded area where he previously spent the night. Despite Madison's pitiful state, he continues to film her as it gives him a sense of satisfaction. Before he goes to sleep, he tries to initiate a conversation with Madison, who is facing away from him out of fear. He reassures her that he means no harm and expresses his excitement about spending time with her. The day after, Daniel prepares their breakfast, so he awakens Madison and offers her a plate. But upon removing the tape from her mouth, she screams loudly for help. This sends Daniel into a panic, leading him to slam the car's door in her face and walk away in frustration. Moments later, Madison eventually calms down, so Daniel apologizes to her for being upset, reasoning that he can't control his emotions. He emphasizes that it's foolish to change who he is because he believes that he can never be anyone but himself. The next morning, Madison, still chained up, relieves herself outside the van. Daniel claims he isn't looking, but he peeks at her occasionally. Having limited movements, Daniel is compelled to help Madison to put her undergarments back on. From time to time, he caresses her and tells her that she's the most beautiful woman in the world, even though his face displays no signs of emotions. At night, he sits near the fire pit and coerces Madison to accompany him while he cooks their meal. He then shares that he has found his soulmate in her and is certain that she will care for him soon. A day later, after Daniel takes a shower outside the van, he proceeds to grab Madison and takes her outside to bathe her next. Then, he brings her back inside to pat her dry, but he loses control at the sight of her bare appearance and begins taking advantage of her. Madison tries to fight back but fails due to her limited strength and movement, so she eventually ends up breaking down in tears. When night falls, Daniel wakes Madison from her sleep and urges her to sit with him at the fire pit. He reveals to her the dysfunctional relationship he has with his absent father and alcoholic mother, which has left him constantly feeling alone. With great sympathy, Madison sheds a tear as she listens to Daniel share with her his struggles to fit in and his desire to experience what other people do. As dawn approaches, Madison finally breaks her silence and begins opening up to him about her strained relationship with her father, who abandoned their family. She tells him that she took her father's place in an attempt to help her mother recover. Therefore, she communicates to him that she isn't ready to pass away because she hasn't lived her life yet. During the night, Madison is warming up by the fire pit when Daniel picks her up and takes her inside the van, where he begins to take advantage of her once again. After Madison falls into a deep sleep, Daniel watches her and is certain that if they have a chance encounter, she won't pay him any attention. The very next day, Daniel arrives back home, and he starts installing a hook onto the wall of his room. Sometime later, he takes some alone time as he's watching the footage of his intimacy with Madison. Right after, he returns to his van to bring her inside his house. He requests her to remain silent on their way, to which she obliges. He then leads her to his room and chains her up while he professes his love for her. Exhausted, Madison doesn't acknowledge his confession and remains hopelessly seated on the floor. That night, as Daniel is sleeping soundly, Madison awakens and stands up from the bed. This awakens Daniel, who becomes curious about where she's headed. To avoid angering him, she gently explains that she's going to the bathroom. Since Daniel refuses to give her such a privilege, he accompanies her as she relieves herself, leaving her with no privacy. Following this, he joins her in the shower and hugs her from behind. Surprisingly, Madison turns and embraces him back, much to the man's delight. Shortly after, Daniel focuses the camera on her while she's sitting on the bed, demanding that they should start over. He inquires about her name, and she tells him, leading him to put her name in the credit scene of the film he's editing. When Madison returns his question, he only replies that he's just Daniel, leaving his surname a complete mystery to her. He then asks her about the things she does for fun, and Madison smiles at the thought of it, revealing that she takes care of her family, especially her younger brother. Driven by curiosity, she asks him why he's constantly filming, to which Daniel simply responds that he's an artist. She proceeds to try to find out why he chose her, but he scolds her and warns her to be cautious of her questions. After a long silence, she asks him if he thinks that the world is ending, just to break the awkward air. For him, if that time comes, he wants to witness everyone, including his family, perish. In the middle of Daniel's rant, a phone call comes through unexpectedly. Thinking that she can finally ask someone for help, Madison immediately springs up from the bed to reach for the phone. Unfortunately, Daniel is faster, so he grabs her by the neck and slams her on the wall. Before he leaves the room, an upset Daniel angrily warns her never to do it again. Just as he answers the phone, Madison immediately screams for help. Daniel, overwhelmed with anger, rushes back to her and proceeds to punish her. Threatened that someone might discover his secret, Daniel begins covering the windows in his house with dark curtains. He then returns to Madison's location and begins to feel bad for her, seeing her trembling in fear. Hoping to regain her trust, he caresses her and apologizes, promising her that he'll never do it again. Moments later, he locks Madison in the room before he leaves. Unbeknownst to her, Daniel is capturing her every move on camera, eager to observe how she'll respond to his absence. When Madison hears that Daniel has finally left the house, she removes the tape from her mouth and screams for help. To no avail, she fails to escape as she hears him return. With a paper bag in his hand, Daniel approaches her and places the contents of the bag on the bed. He announces that it's a special gift from him, but Madison, who's displeased, acknowledges it unenthusiastically. Daniel proceeds to instruct her to put it on, and just before he leaves the room, he whispers a chilling reminder to her ear that no one can hear her screams. Eventually, Daniel bathes the room in sultry red lighting and orders Madison to come out after slipping into daring undergarments. He directs her movements to appeal to the visions he has for his film, all while enhancing the mood by playing sensual music in the background. Despite showing hesitancy, Madison complies with his commands. Sometime later, Daniel dives into the process of editing the clips he took of Madison dancing in her undergarments and incorporating them into his film. Following this, Daniel, who's starting to prepare their meal, hears Madison's call from their room. Curious, he rushes to her location and asks what she wants, so Madison offers to help him in preparing their food. As they sit together on the kitchen floor, savoring their meal, Daniel reveals that his mother's cooking is terrible, so he often eats out. In contrast, Madison voices that she has learned to cook to take care of her mother and younger brother. Suddenly, she asks Daniel about his motives for filming everything, so he discloses that he feels the obligation to show society the reality of human experience. Intrigued, Madison expresses her intent to watch his film, and a delighted Daniel allows her to view his piece entitled Beautiful Friend. Later, he shares that he used to work as a filmmaker, yet his projects never garnered any interest, much to his frustration. Back in the bedroom, Daniel asks Madison if she knows anything about trauma bonding, which he discloses as the message of his film. Madison voices that she's clueless, so Daniel points out that it's what they're experiencing right now. After a while, Madison wakes up to see Daniel freeing her from the chains, giving her hope that he's starting to warm up to her. However, he's just reminding her that it's time for her to use the bathroom. During Madison's bath, Daniel assures her that he can take care of her if she allows him to. On that same day, Madison teaches Daniel how to play a card game. In the process, the bond between them starts to blossom, with Madison being more comfortable and relaxed around him. At one moment, Daniel wonders if he can kiss her, because he has never experienced it with anyone before. When he hears no response from her, he emphasizes that they don't have to do it if she doesn't want to. Madison studies his face and contemplates for a moment before leaning in to kiss him. Due to the tension, Daniel can't resist her anymore, so he makes love to her. Once the deed is done, Daniel confesses his love for her, and Madison reciprocates it, declaring that she also feels the same way toward him. Breaking the silence, Madison requests Daniel to get her some makeup because she feels she isn't pretty enough. He quickly reassures her that she is perfect, just as she is. However, after giving it some thought, he decides to grant her wish, which brightens her mood. The next morning, Daniel chains her up again before he leaves to go to the makeup store. Like a loving lover, he plants a kiss on her lips and proceeds to go on his way. The instant moment he's away, Madison quickly wipes her mouth and starts moving around the room, attempting to break the chains, unaware that Daniel has set up a camera outside the room to capture if she's planning to escape. Meanwhile, on the road, Daniel thinks that he has finally found the woman for him. Back in the house, Madison feels hopeless that she can't find a way to free herself. Daniel then arrives home and finds her sitting still in bed, appearing as if she remains well-behaved while he's away. Yet, when he reviews the footage from the camera, he sees her desperate attempts to escape. Right after, he returns to their room and films Madison, who is wallowing in misery. He tells her that everything that has happened is destined and that she is meant to be with him. With a stern tone, he questions if she grasps the situation, to which she responds with a weary nod, her expression filled with defeat. Not long after, Jeanette knocks on the front door, encouraging Madison to scream for help immediately. However, Daniel is fast enough to silence her by putting duct tape on her mouth. A few days later, Daniel feels proud that he has finished editing his film. He hears Madison's muffled cries, which prompt him to get up and punish her.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.